Welcome to this visual explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly fascinating philosophical argument from a classic source text. So often we grapple with these grand, abstract mysteries of the universe, right? Things that just seem way too vast or infinite for our minds to fully wrap around. But our source material today takes a remarkably grounded approach. It actually suggests that by looking closely at our everyday technology, we can build a sort of mental bridge to the divine. We're going to explore how something as completely ordinary as flipping a light switch might actually hold the key to understanding universal scales of power. All right, let's dive right in.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really get it, I want you to paint a vivid picture in your mind. Imagine a massive metropolis on a night of some grand celebration. It's twilight, the sky's just getting dark, and then boom! At the precise push of a single button, hundreds of thousands of streetlights, neon signs, and building windows turn on simultaneously. It happens in an absolute instant. A whole city illuminated in a fraction of a second from one central command. It's a spectacular visual, right? We see it and we marvel at it, sure, but because it's human engineering, we kind of just accept it as perfectly normal. And that right there brings us to the core philosophical problem presented in our source. The text asks a really pointing question: if such an instantaneous, widespread effect is so completely ordinary with basic human technology, why on earth should we struggle to imagine a much greater, universal power doing the exact same thing? Think about it. We don't doubt the power of one touch when an engineer flips a switch at a power plant. We totally understand the wiring, the grid, the flow of energy. The author of our text is basically challenging us to realize that if human capability can achieve this simultaneous action on a massive, citywide scale, well, maybe our conceptual hurdle regarding grander infinite scales is really just a lack of perspective.
So, to address this lack of perspective, the text utilizes a specific logical framework. It introduces this concept of kias, which essentially translates to analogy or comparative reasoning. Now, what the author is doing here is specifically leveraging the absolute most advanced technology of their era to bridge the gap between human limitation and divine capability. The logic is straightforward, but honestly, it's profound. You take a known advanced technological tool that the audience already gets, and you use it as a comparative baseline to help them grasp a totally unfamiliar, invisible, or seemingly infinite concept. It's an objective tool of reasoning specifically designed to make the abstract incredibly concrete.
And this brilliantly illustrates the text's central logical comparison. First, just consider human-made technology. It's impressive, yes, for sure, but it is inherently limited, right? It requires wires, constant maintenance, physical infrastructure. But in contrast, the text places the concept of divine power, boundless, infinite, and totally unrestricted by physical constraints. The author's argument is that if the limited, flawed, restricted human mind can invent a system that operates simultaneously across vast distances, then logically, a limitless power would execute similar simultaneous commands absolutely effortlessly. In the author's framework, the human invention essentially acts as a proof of concept for the divine reality. With that framework established, let's transition to the specific analogy provided by the author, Bediuzzaman, in the source material. We're going to impartially examine his exact words to see exactly how he constructs this argument. He uses the imagery of electricity, which, keep in mind, was the absolute peak of modern technological wonder at the time of his writing, to explain one of the most challenging theological concepts out there: physical resurrection. Let's look at exactly how he phrases this mental exercise.
Here is the first part of his quote. An example of the revival of bodies is how, in a massive city on a festive night, 100,000 electric lamps are lit almost timelessly in an instant from a single center. Notice the speed and the sheer wonder embedded in that imagery. The lamps aren't lit one by one, manually, like someone walking around with a match. No, they are lit almost timelessly. And I really want to emphasize that final phrase, from a single center. That right there is the mechanical anchor of his whole argument. One central point of command resulting in 100,000 simultaneous, instantaneous actions. So the crucial point is how this scales. The author immediately follows up with this. By the same logic, it is possible to provide light simultaneously to hundreds of millions of lamps across the vast Earth from a single center. You see, he unpacks the second half of this thought experiment seamlessly. If the logic holds up for 100,000 lamps in one city, well, it mathematically and logically scales up to hundreds of millions of lamps across the entire planet. The massive size of the grid doesn't somehow negate the principle of the single command center. The underlying mechanism remains perfectly consistent, whether it's local or global. Let's just quickly walk through the precise logical progression of this argument. First, we start with electricity, right? A purely human-made invention. Second, we observe that it operates at incredible, almost timeless speeds that seem like magic but are entirely real. Third, it does this not through some random chaos, but by functioning within established, highly structured, and wise laws of physics. Therefore, the text concludes it serves as a logical proof for greater realities. Think about it. If a limited human invention operates this efficiently and systematically under physical laws, the underlying, grander systems of the universe must be vastly more capable.
And this brings us to the definitive conclusion drawn from the source text. The author states, "Since even a human-made, limited invention like electricity can work at this speed, surely the luminous servants of the true creator of this order can accomplish resurrection in the blink of an eye." From a strictly objective standpoint, we can see exactly how the author constructs his theological stance here. He uses the very tangible speed of electricity to challenge and directly address any intellectual hesitations someone might have about the speed and scale of a divine, universe-wide event.
Let's move to and see how this builds in our modern era. The source material uses the 20th century marvel of electricity, which, was absolutely perfect for its time. But as an explainer of this text today, we can actually upgrade this metaphor to fit our 21st century reality. We can apply the exact same framework of qiyas or analogy, but substitute the electric grid with something even faster, even more complex, and much more universally understood by literally everyone watching this today.
Just consider how this scale expands over time. We start with step 1, a single lamp turning on. Simple enough, right? Step 2 expands to the author's analogy, a sprawling city grid lighting up from a single center. But now look at step 3, the internet reaching billions of global devices instantly. As our human technology progresses, our daily familiarity with instantaneous, huge-scale events increases dramatically. And paradoxically, this technological advancement actually makes the author's original philosophical and spiritual point way easier to grasp today than it was a century ago.
I mean, today we're talking about billions of connected devices. Billions. A single push notification, a single tiny piece of code, or a single viral video can reach billions of smartphones worldwide in mere milliseconds. From just a single server center, a command is executed and billions of individual screens literally light up across the globe simultaneously. We live this reality every single day. The sheer immense scale of modern networks perfectly mirrors the planetary analogy the text originally proposed.
Now, what's really interesting about this is when we compare that 20th century metaphor of electricity to the 21st century reality of the internet, a fascinating pattern emerges. The grand synthesis here is that as our technology advances, our understanding of grand spiritual analogies actually becomes much more logical. The more capable we become at creating these instantaneous global networks, the less abstract the author's argument becomes. In this framework, our own inventions are quite literally training our minds to comprehend concepts of infinite scale. All of this modern technological synthesis, the electric grids, the massive servers, the billions of devices reacting in milliseconds, it all brings us directly back to the final anchoring piece of our source material. The text argues that modern technology is essentially just a giant visual aid to help us understand an ancient truth, one that was recorded in scripture long before cables, cell towers, and Wi-Fi ever even existed.
The author anchors his entire technological thought experiment in this scriptural verse. It reads, "Our command is but a single word. It occurs instantly, like the blinking of an eye." This is from Surah Al-Qamar. The text uses this verse as the ultimate foundation for the concept of an instantaneous command. So, whether it's 100,000 lamps in a city, a billion smartphones on a network, or the resurrection of bodies across the earth, the source material argues that from the perspective of a supreme creator, the execution requires absolutely no more effort than a single word, occurring in the literal blink of an eye. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative question directly inspired by the source text. Can you imagine this easier with today's technology? The author used electricity to open the minds of his contemporaries to these vast, universal possibilities. Today, with the entire globe interconnected in literal milliseconds, that mental bridge is stronger than ever. So the next time you see a city light up, or your phone pings with a message sent from halfway across the world, ask yourself, how does this completely ordinary technology shape your view of the universe's ultimate capabilities? Thank you so much for joining this visual explainer. Keep asking great questions, and always keep looking closely at the world around you.